Hello everyone, and welcome to this Knowledge Cafe organized by km4dev, a community of international development KMers who are passionate about knowledge management. This will be the number 17 Knowledge Cafe since we started this incredible adventure that helped KMers to share practical experiences and bright ideas about knowledge management in international development sector. Today, we will talk about communities of practices, which are defined by Wenger Trainer as a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And in particular, today we'll take a close look at a brand new community of practice toolkit recently developed by the World Bank Group. This is a priceless resource for communities managers and other practitioners invested in building communities of practice. Davide Piga and Ray Eisenberg were directly involved in building this CoP Toolkit, and we are very happy to have them with us as guest speakers, together with Ilaria Urbani, who works in IFAD, providing support for communities of practice. Our Knowledge Cafe are always promoted in our community mailing list. I invite you to join us. David and Tim, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, KM4dev, for hosting us, and a huge thank you to all who are interested in communities of practice. My name is Davide Piga. I am management coordinator at the World Bank Group. Specifically, I am the team lead of the amazing team that has developed this toolkit that we'll be discussing today and exploring today. I'd like to give you a very brief and concise introduction about the toolkit, what it is, where it comes from, and who it is for. And talking about who it is for, I just wanted to show you who registered today. So basically, this speaks to the topic of who the target audience for this tool, who the people who we hope will benefit from it are. And I thought the best way to visualize this was to take a look at the ones that showed up, that is you. We have more than 100 organizations. They're spread across more than 40 countries. And there is a fairly equal distribution of different actors within the international development sector. You can see, obviously, agencies, NGOs, development banks, government agencies. So basically, this is all to say that there are organizations of different kinds involved in the international development who are spread across the whole entire globe. They do very different, they all need communities of practice. We think that's because collaboration is essential, especially in these times where we have to face very complex challenges that need to be solved quickly and sometimes in a very innovative way. Thinking, for example, of the COVID pandemic. There is no single PhD who would have the solution, but when you put people together, that is when they have solutions. They can design effective solutions. So that's what the demand for CoP capacity building is, and that's why we have developed this project. I just wanted to give a very quick background to answer the question, where does the CoP toolkit come from? You can see in this slide at the World Bank Group, we have an ecosystem of about 400 communities of practice. Now, the infographic I'm showing you is from 2018. Since then, the demand has grown exponentially, I would say, for communities of practice. And as you can see, the communities at the bank, they're everywhere. They are in different sectors, segments of the organization. They use different platforms. They are internal, they're external communities. So it's a very diverse ecosystem which needs organizational support. And in terms of support, the team that I've led for the past 2 years has existed for about 9 years, providing this kind of support in various ways. There were training programs, there were manuals, there were other activities which were aimed at motivating the people involved in communities and also aimed at generating evidence of impact, such as the case of the Stories of Impact competition. And the manuals that you see, they're basically the ancestors of what is the toolkit. So it's nothing new. It's the result of the work of 9 years in the ecosystem of communities of practice at the World Bank Group. And I want to conclude this brief introduction with these slides, which serves two purposes. One is to simply give a shout out to the people behind the scenes, but also the second purpose is to encourage those of you who might think that supporting an ecosystem, building and supporting an ecosystem of communities of practice is something that requires immense resources. That's not the case. This was a team of 5. It's always been a team of 5, obviously with a lot of contributors, but you don't really need that much. You need the expertise, you need the commitment, but it's not impossible. You need just a few people committed to building the ecosystem. Now, this being said, I would like to show you very briefly how the toolkit looks like. This is what it is. It's a simple website. You have received the link in the invite, and we will share the link again. It's an online database of informative articles. You will find about, for now, 14 articles organized across 4 different topics, which are learn about COP fundamentals, start your community, develop your community, and increase member engagement, which is a very hot topic. Everybody who works with COPs is particularly interested in ways to increase member engagement. And each section contains articles. What the boxes you're seeing on the screen, they are basically the articles, the single articles. So for example, if you open one, you will see that there is a summary with key information about the content of the article, a set of resources. What I wanted to mention, not only you will find information on how to go through specific steps, which are required or recommended in some cases to build your community. In many articles, you will find templates and tools which you can download. And bear in mind, this toolkit has been published under a Creative Commons license. So we want to encourage as many people as possible to benefit from it. And we want to encourage organizations to take the toolkit, make it their own, and use it to develop their own ecosystem of communities of practice. So that in a nutshell, this is all theoretical. I thought it would be very interesting to look at how these tools have been used in real life. So I'm going to hand over to Ilaria Urbani from IFAD. Ilaria is a COP, a knowledge management COP specialist. She is working to support the ecosystem of COPs at IFAD, and she will tell us a few stories of case studies of communities of practice that have adopted some of the tools. So Ilaria, over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks Davide for the floor. As he said, I work at IFAD as a KM and COP consultant. So last year, IFAD started supporting communities and networks in a more structured way. And we were looking for approaches and methodologies to set up communities used by other development organizations, such as UNICEF, FAO, and World Bank. So I participated at the World Bank course, Introduction to Communities, and to their training module for community managers. And when we started this journey at IFAD, we were also referring a lot to the resources such as the Gardener's Guide, the primer, but also to the UNICEF toolbox. What we have done in IFAD is adapting the World Bank step-by-step approach to setting up communities to our corporate needs. We have worked with COP owners to analyze their needs, to define the purpose and objectives of their communities, the key people to involve, and how to monitor our COPs. Now I will show you how we adapted their approach and tools to our context. So the first section of the toolkit is COP fundamentals, which show the basis for building a COP. The World Bank approach identified 3 main elements: purpose, people, and practice. And in IFAD, when someone comes to us asking support to develop a community, we usually have rounds of brainstorming meetings. And the first one is dedicated to cover and discuss these 3 main topics. Indeed, it is crucial to understand the purpose of the COP that they have in mind, the key people they would like to involve, and the practice that will motivate members to engage. And here on the right side, you can see a drafted document shared to me last year by a COP owner after our first discussion, covering the 3 elements: purpose, people, and practice. Now the GEL group is live. It is one of the most active COP at IFAD. It has 155 members last time that I checked. And the description now of the COP has slightly changed from there because they refine the purpose and the practice together with the core members. The World Bank promotes the use of other 2 tools to set up communities. One is the stakeholder analysis and the audience analysis. In IFAD, we use both of them. Regarding the stakeholder analysis, the Livestock for Social Development community and IFAD COP wanted to be designed through a shared and bottom-up approach. And we therefore carry out the stakeholder analysis to receive feedback from livestock practitioners around the world. The goal was to get to know the potential members, especially what motivates them and what they value. And as you can see here, the respondents identify climate change as the main issue affecting the sector, thus suggesting the COP should focus on evidence and best practices related to sustainable livestock. It also emerged that good practices from the field, practical material, and information about funding opportunities would be the most useful type of information for the members, therefore guiding the COP owners in deciding the content to be shared. So a stakeholder analysis is really a key step while designing a community to better understand your stakeholder and their needs to secure support and gain alignment on goals. Then regarding the audience analysis, this is a crucial tool to analyze members' needs and aspiration. In IFAD, we carried out the audience analysis with an already active and functioning CoP to monitor members' needs, because they can change over time, of course, as well as the membership itself of a community. And the COP should reflect those changes and also the new needs. So we developed a survey for the gender network, which is an IFAD CoP, made of two sections. One more related to members' challenges and another on member expectation and knowledge needs. And it emerged that more than 60% of the respondents would be interested in strengthening their knowledge on gender and youth and on gender and climate. And through the survey, the members also show an interest on new learning opportunities such as trainings, workshops, and seminars. So the audience analysis is a great tool, it's a great exercise to receive inputs from your own members on the type of knowledge the CoP should be sharing and on new activities that might be implemented. So I would like to share with you also the two tools that we use and adapt at IFAD as well. The first one is the CoP Charter, which is the most useful tool that I have ever used for developing a community. It is really the constitution, and it helps you defining the strategy of your CoP. The World Bank template is based around three main pillars: purpose, people, and practice. In IFAD, we adapted the charter to our own context because we have slightly different needs or priorities, but always covering those three elements. So to develop the charter of an IFAD CoP, the livestock one, we followed a structured approach. We first had a meeting with our owners and moderators with the core group, and we created the version 0 of the charter, which is the one on the left side of the presentation. So is this one on the left side is the version 0 of the CoP charter that we first created. The text has been cut because it couldn't fit in one page, of course, but I just wanted to show you the blue questions that were the one guiding us through this exercise, and in yellow, the questions that we couldn't reply at the moment and that would have need more consultation. So that is the adaptation I was speaking about, because the CoP charter templates provide you with guidance, but if you have different priorities or needs, then you can come back to some questions later. For instance, we knew that we couldn't address the finance-related question about the resources, like list the cost for the CoP without speaking with our budget expert, so that's why we skipped that question. Then, since we wanted to have a really inclusive and bottom-up approach to set up this community, we organized a 2-day workshop gathering almost 20 experts dealing with livestock from external organizations, because this was for a livestock community. We presented our version 0 of the charter, and the goal was to refine it together during the event in order to include the feedback and the input from the main stakeholders. So by the end of the workshop, we developed a proper strategy for the livestock community. And here on the right side, you can see the structure of the strategy, which builds on the World Bank Charter. So I want to conclude this presentation mentioning another great tool that we use when a CoP is already set up, which is the storytelling. So we all know that both qualitative and quantitative approaches should be used to assess the value of existing communities in order to have a more robust picture of the contribution that they make. And in IFAD, we decided to start collecting stories to be able to demonstrate the value that communities bring in to our senior management. So we conducted interviews with owners and moderators using some guiding questions, such as, what do you think are the biggest benefits of these communities? What would be missing if these communities close down? And we also included questions on members' aspiration and needs regarding community development at the corporate level to help us planning our future steps as IFAD on CoP support. So we are now creating blogs with these stories, but also infographics, as you can see here, in order to reach a wider audience. So here was the overview of how IFAD adapted and implemented the World Bank Group Toolkit for developing and managing CoPs. So we strongly recognize the role of this methodology because it provides you with practical tools that can be adapted to your own context, and that would help you designing and developing communities in your organization. In IFAD, we are planning to create our guiding notes for IFAD COPs, building on our own experience and the World Bank approach, tools, and best practices. So thank you, and over to you, Davide.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. Excellent examples of real life communities of practice and how these tools can be applied to your own communities. Now, in the third segment of today's Knowledge Cafe, I wanted to invite Ray Eisenberg, who has been a member of the Communities Vetted team, this COP support team at the World Bank Group for over 8 years. And he has been a core trainer. So he knows a lot about building capacity for COPs. And he is one of the main authors of the primer, which is one of the manuals on which the Community of Practice Toolkit was based on. And of course, he also contributed to writing most of the articles on the toolkit. So he is the most knowledgeable person that I can think of to look at the questions that we received from you. And talking about questions, thank you to start with to all of you for taking the time to tell you what it is that you are busy with today concerning your COPs. We received a number of questions, 150 of them. We have identified recurring topics, and above all is increased engagement. But let me not take more time, and let me introduce Ray. Ray, if you're online, over to you to talk about answers to the questions we received from the participants.
Okay, thank you, David, and welcome everybody. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to enter their questions on the registration form. And in the chat. We've been really blown away by the response, actually. As David has said, we received well over 150 questions. So again, thank you. So obviously, we're not going to be able to answer each and every one individually, but what we are going to do is a couple of things. So not all the questions are unique. So we've grouped similar questions together under topic areas, and we'll answer as many of those today. In fact, 5 topic areas, which I'll describe in a little while. Plus, and I think this is a big plus, we have addressed all the topics and all the questions in a handout that we will share, a written handout that we will share with you in the next few days. I mean, think of this as a frequently asked questions FAQ and a guide to navigating around the toolkit, but I think you'll find this really, really useful. So let's get started with the 5 main topic areas. So most of the questions revolved around these 5 topic areas. Questions about increasing engagement, questions about value, how do you define and demonstrate it, and how does this help you secure sponsorship? A lot of questions about starting a community of practice. Once it's going, questions about leading, managing, and planning the work of a community of practice. And I would say the last large bucket was about questions about digital platforms and tools for COPs. So let me start with the first one around engagement. And not surprisingly, the largest section of questions is about engagement. Everybody wants to know about engagement. It's community managers. It's what keeps them up at night. But I would say this before you even start thinking about engagement, is to go back to basic principles. And Ilaria made reference to this about the 3 main pillars of your community of practice: purpose, people, and process, and practice. Purpose. Do you have the right subject matter for your audience, and what are your objectives? Or did you have the right ones, but they've now changed? I mean, you may have had original goals around literacy in a certain country, but it's really what you're trying to achieve is better training for your teachers. And what area of teachers? Is it primary, secondary, or tertiary? So really be clear about your purpose. Secondly, people. Do you have the right membership for your call? Are you addressing the right members? Did you start off with very specialized people, but now you want to widen the membership? Or did you start off with a kind of beginning type of specialist, but now you want to increase their ability. Do you have the right people, and do you understand their needs? So Ilaria talked about their needs analysis, audience analysis, stakeholder analysis. Are you really addressing everybody's needs? And finally, practice. Are you meeting? How are you conducting your community of practice? Are you meeting in the most relevant, what we call convening venues? Really a kind of fancy word for where do your members want to meet. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. We had a very successful community of practice at the World Bank. I was helping mentor them, and we tried forever to get them on Yammer. They would not go on Yammer. They refused to go on Yammer. So don't force people into places they don't want to go. And it was still a very successful community of practice. Luckily, they were co-located, and pre-pandemic, they met physically very, very regularly. But meet people where they already are. Go to where people are already meeting. And so I would direct you to, in the toolkit, the CoP framework. So there's an article there on the CoP framework, and that has lots more about that. Having thought about kind of activities in general, think about them in kind of 3 levels: the strategic level, again about the purpose, at the design level, again with the purpose in members in mind, how do you design that engagement activity itself? And then the execution level, what are the steps you need to implement any particular engagement activity? And we have quite a few, so there's a whole section on engagement and individual articles on specific engagement and tactics. So one about staging engagement, where you actually, and this is about where you post something and ask for comment, but you also behind the scenes talk to your most enthusiastic members and say, hey, I posted an article. I need you to get the ball rolling. I need you to kick off the conversation. Please make a comment here. Organizing a community roundtable or a peer assist or a fishbowl or an e-debate. There are articles all about that. I think one big area where you can make an impact for engagement is about making your content social. And what I mean by that is making your content so that it stimulates collaboration. So using things like so questions or requests for comments at the end. Never end a blog of yours without asking for a question. How did this resonate with you? Do you have an experience of that? And you may not get very many comments, but you will get no comments if you don't answer the question. And when you write a blog, open it, and you're on a blogging platform, open the blog for comments to be made. And of course, use @ mentions. And I'm very fond of @ mentions because personally, I find, and I'm sure you find it, if anybody's on Facebook, whether you live in Facebook or you're even peripherally involved, if you get a notification saying, and you get an @ mention, you've been mentioned in such and such, you go and see it. If you've been tagged in a photograph, you go and see it. It's a very powerful magnet for stimulating engagement. And the other advantage of @ mentions, when you do go there, you feel good about it, and not just a good feeling, but when other people see it, your reputation's enhanced in a professional environment rather than a personal Facebook environment. Your reputation is enhanced, your credibility is enhanced. Say, hey, this is the guy that knows a lot about this stuff. Everyone's @ mentioning him. So definitely use @ mentions in your content and make your content social. I think another area is a key role that leadership plays in helping drive engagement. And one of my mantras is model what you want to see mirrored. So if you want to see people on the platform, make sure you're on the platform. Make sure your boss, your senior manager is on the platform. Don't be sending out major announcements through emails. You can send out your email, but say the announcement is on Yammer, or it is on Teams, or it is on your platform. Drive people to the platform. Drive people to the website, and have your leadership do the same. It's no use, again, them saying everyone should be on the platform, and then they just respond through email. So whatever you can do to make sure that the promotion is via the platform. So again, I would direct you to the articles on the core team and specific roles articles and the article on the core group. We had one particular question about, can you achieve engagement without a KM lead? I probably speak heresy here when I say, yes, you can have engagement without a dedicated KM lead. And not many communities of practice have a dedicated KM lead. And communities of practice, it's a team sport, it's a collective responsibility to provide those communication, facilitation, and other KM best practices. However, you may be able to secure KM advice from your organization's central KM team if you have one, or knowledge managers based in other departments. I find that they're often willing to lend their advice on an intermittent basis. We also had a question, several questions around engagement within a specific country context. So my advice here is around thinking local. Obviously use the local language if possible, but make it specific to and timely for that country or region. I know when I was working for a major software company, and we were running 10 international communities of practice really for an engineering drafting company. And we had a community of practice in India, and of course, India's second language is English, so English was promoted there. But I always advise my community managers there to provide content with a local context. And the greatest engagement we had was around videos recorded in Hindi, in local language there. And it was very successful. And we emphasized, changes in regulations in India, or policy changes in India, or local district changes. So make it, to make it local if you're having issues with engagement in country. So a lot of questions about value, defining and demonstrating value, and securing sponsorship and support from senior management. So we have quite a few articles on that, on member needs, shared value, and the core group. So I would say the two areas on value: one, value to members, and value to management, or leaders or sponsors. So value to members, identify member needs. So a successful community is one that provides value to its members by addressing whatever needs they have and challenges they have. And you can identify member needs through surveys, through in-depth interviews. You can also build on the needs of the core group. So the core group should have your champions. It should be a very representative small group of between 5 or 10 people who represent your larger membership. But these are your champions. And above all, you should satisfy the needs of the core group. And if you satisfy, I think, the needs of the core group, then you'll certainly have a great chance of satisfying the needs of the larger membership. And you can gauge other things, what people value, like what blog posts are getting the most views and comments, what pages in the website are visited most, and you can use, the analytics tools on your platform or Google Analytics to find out what people are looking at, what questions are asked most, what events are attended most. If you're running, brown bag lunches once a month, which are the subjects that are really gaining people's attention? And this particular webinar or knowledge event that we're doing now is a perfect example. As I say, we're blown away. We had 200 registrants, over 150 questions. This is obviously a topic that's really is getting people's attention. So the second area is identify value to the organization, and I expect this is always a hard one for community managers, because a lot of times we talk about number of members and we talk about kind of internal health of the community, how many likes we're getting, and really senior management and your sponsors and your funders are not really interested in that. So the value to the organization is always going to depend on what problem it is trying to solve. For example, are people working in isolation? There's a lack of communication. Or is the problem that knowledge products are not getting out into the field? Or if they are getting into the field, they're not being adopted. What is the problem? Is the fact that telemedicine is not working in rural areas, is it a problem of communications, or is it the fact that there's no new universal healthcare? So what is the problem that's being solved? What is the problem that needs to be solved? And you have to demonstrate the extent to which the community can ameliorate or address these problems. So those, you have those two areas, value to members and value to the organization. And where those overlap is we call shared value. And maximizing shared value will give your CoPs the greatest chance of success. So we have articles on shared value and the business case for a CoP. There's often a lack of kind of marketing of development agencies and business cases around it. So I would encourage you to look at the business case for a CoP and really make a business case. And it doesn't have to be always financial or in numbers. And as Hilaria shared with you in her presentation, use stories to show value to senior management. Stories are really important because they add a human and emotional factor, which has often far greater impact than the raw data. And gather impactful stories at every stage of the value creation process. Not just wait till the end and say, did we have an impact? Or look at all the way through as the CoP is working. Stories are often bucketed into qualitative data, but once you gather sufficient qualitative data, you can start to extract from that and start to aggregate that qualitative data into quantitative data, and start saying, well, 50% of communities of practice did this, or people that were members of the community did this. People that weren't members of the community took longer to implement these policies than people that were members of the community. So the stories don't just have an emotional impact, you can also extract some quantitative data from them as well. And we have articles, creating impactful stories, article on impact evaluation and reporting as well, which talks about how you can best present this type of data to your senior management and to your funders. The next large area I'm going to talk about, the next large area of questions was about starting a CoP, how to design a CoP, set up a CoP, start a CoP, launch your communities of practice. So again, at the risk, I will repeat myself again, you have to start with the three main pillars: purpose, people, and practice. Purpose, what do you want to talk about, and what are you trying to achieve? What are your objectives for the community of practice? And I notice one of my colleagues, Bruce Summers, is on the line, and he is a key gatekeeper for enabling people to start communities of practice at the World Bank. And it's one of his first questions: what are you trying to achieve? And very often the conversation ends there and then because people don't have a good idea of what they're trying to achieve. And I know lots of us have been instructed with, you need to start a community of practice and you have to go off and do it, but you really need to know what you're trying to achieve first. Who's your target audience? And at this beginning stage, what do you think are your member needs? And later on, you'll validate these assumptions. And as Hilaria said, you'll start to fill out the community charter, which is a record of your considerations about purpose, people, and practice. And practice, where are your members going to meet? So it's going to be in person or online. Where do they normally get their information? How are you going to capture that tacit knowledge? How are you going to distribute it? What platforms are you going to use? All these kinds of things you need to start considering, even at the very, very initial stage. And we talk about the 5 musts, which are 5 essential community building principles, which are know your members. 1, define the value to members and value to the organization. Plan and define a strategy. We're very often weak on strategy and dive into tactics. I've got to hold a round table, or I've got to create a newsletter. Let's have a strategy first. Decide roles and responsibilities, and I will talk about roles and responsibilities in the next section, and set up a process to test, measure, and iterate. And we have articles on the 5 musts, on member needs, on shared value, roles in the community of practice and the core group. But let me talk a little bit more about starting small and testing, learning, and iterate. So these are concepts from an agile methodology, and I'm sure lots of you are familiar with an agile methodology. And we came up with this term of minimum viable community, and that was in another webinar a few months ago, and someone came up with said, oh, we have a new term, the minimum viable community. I said, no, we came up with that a year ago now. So a minimum viable community is the minimum you need to start a community practice. It gives you the advantage of it gives you something tangible you can experiment with. So start by just bringing a few partners or allies and fleshing out the basic concepts of your community of practice based on the 3 principles: purpose, people, and practice, and the 5 musts. Try it out, test it, see what resonates and what doesn't. Don't go through, and this is this minimal viable community. I mean, David had talked about how we've developed over the years. We've been doing this, certainly Amelia's been doing this for over 8 years. I've been there for 6 years. We started with the Gardener's Guide. We had the primer, we had multiple courses, beginning and advanced. We had a lot of counseling, and the minimum viable community is something that arose out of that, and it's fairly recent, but it just really resonated with people. And it's a great way to get started. What's the minimum you need to start your community? And then build on that before, instead of doing kind of what's the opposite, which is a kind of what's called the waterfall development process in software development, but to spend many months creating this massive edifice and launching the program on the platform, and then nobody comes, and you've just wasted a lot of time and a lot of money. So start small, test it, and iterate it. And there's an article on minimum viable community, on the CoP framework, and the 5 musts. So I talked earlier about roles in the community, and a lot of questions about leading, managing, and planning the work of a community of practice, and also areas about planning the actual work. So as I said before, community is a team sport. So think distributed leadership and fostering champions, and plan for succession, which very few of us do. So the World Bank, we initially start with a 2 or 3 person core team, usually a senior member, a technical team lead or higher, sets the initial strategy, begins the work of starting the minimum viable community. Next, we try to get together a core group, which can be any number, but it's usually around 5 to 12 people. And these are your most passionate members of the community, and here's where the community champions are. So that's how we start. At some point, the core team may decide that it needs a community manager. Not every community practice has a community manager, certainly a person dedicated to the running of your community. But there are several other leadership roles to consider, such as community leader, the community sponsor, technical expert, the knowledge management advisor, communications advisor, and administrative support. I mentioned the communications advisor because a lot of what we do in community is communications, and we're not expert at communications. So if you can get hold of a communications person to help you, they don't have to sit in the core group. But as I said, with a knowledge management advisor, if you can get that person just advise you from time to time, let's say you have a newsletter and you want it worded better, or to have greater impact, or to look at the design, or if you're starting a campaign, you should not start a communication campaign without some expertise from a communication expert. So try and find that. But the main point about what I'm saying is it's a distributed leadership. There are several roles, and that is the way that you should be running your community. I'll say a little word about succession, a few words about succession, because we don't talk about succession planning. And in fact, a lot of management doesn't talk about succession planning. It's like the person leaves and like, who's going to do the job? So a lot of communities will fail when the initial enthusiasts leave the community, either through promotions or different jobs, different companies, different organizations, extended vacations, missions abroad. So it's important, one, to have backup people for each of the different roles when people are on extended absences, especially the community leader and community manager. And it's also been important to be nurturing the next iteration of the core team and the core group. People will get burnt out. You have your most enthusiastic people there in your champions, but it's unrealistic and unfair to think that they are going to be doing all of the work for you all of the time. And, you know, at some point they will leave. Often they will come back. So it's much better to plan for their leaving in a, you know, have people shadow them, have people ready from outside your core group. You will have a bunch of kind of active people, not as active as the core group, but you can select from those active people to start bringing into the core group and training them and onboarding them into the core group. So it's important to plan for them leaving. So articles and the toolkits around core team and core group and roles in the community of practice. Looking at planning the work. So there's two contrasting approaches. Regular cadence, the what I would call opportunistic timeliness. So a useful tool that we certainly use at the World Bank for the regular work of the community is something called a 30, 60, 90-day action plan. And it's the 30, 60, 90-day action planning framework. And it's an approach that enables you to plan your community activities over the short and medium term, that is over the next 30, 60, 90 days. And dividing activities into chunks makes planning more manageable, and it ensures that longer activities do not get delayed or overwhelmed by a short-term activity. So an example would be if you have an event, you know, let's say we have an event in July, August, September. Let's say in September, then you need to start sending out save the dates in June. You need to send out reminders in July. In June, you need to start gathering your speakers or even earlier. So all these activities have to be planned, and it's very useful to put them in these 30, 60, 90-day today buckets. And one of the nice things about planning these activities, you can spread them out so you don't get overloaded in any of the three periods. But it also establishes a regular rhythm, or what we call a cadence for the community. You know, whether it's a weekly meeting, a Friday water cooler social event, a bi-weekly webinar, a monthly newsletter, the larger annual event. It shows people what to expect, and it shows people when to show up. So it's very, very useful for that. On the other hand, doing the same thing repeatedly can get boring and stale. So it's always useful to be opportunistic and especially take advantage of current events. You know, a speaker that's become available, or a speaker that's in town, a new policy announcement that would benefit from discussion, new regulations that need the analysis of the community. Events and conferences of allied professions or your own profession. You may have a community of practice within your organization about knowledge management, but km4dev has regular conferences and regular meetings. These are very useful to send your members to your own professional associations, where it's in health, in education, in training. All of these kind of things help it keep it fresh for members. And tools that can help with your planning activities include activity, content, and editorial calendars. So any activity without a due date is just an aspiration, as we say. So dates need to be assigned to each activity, and a calendar is a nice, simple, and very familiar format to plan those activities and communicate those dates. So a lot of tools have a basic calendar on them, and you can use that. And the articles to read on that are around action planning and calendaring. We're about 5 minutes from the end here, Davide. I've covered like 90% or 75% of what kind of we wanted to cover. I just want to give you time to kind of wrap it up and say where we're going next and what to do. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ray. This has been an incredible download of knowledge. And thank you also to those 151 of you who are passionate about communities of practice and took the time to tell you what is your challenge now, what are you busy doing with your community of practice, and asking a question for us to respond. We have a couple of minutes. We have 5 minutes. We're going to wrap up very soon. But I see Bruce Summers is in the room, and I wanted to give him a big shout out. You might have seen that he has been doing live transcript in the chat. That's one of the things that he does, but he is also one of the core trainers in the Communities Reinvented program. And of course, he has contributed to putting this toolkit together. So I wanted to see if Bruce would like to add anything, he would like to make a comment before we hand over to Ginetta for wrapping up the session. Before I do that, let me just say, there are questions we haven't had the time to answer. We will circulate a handout with additional information. Particularly, there is a whole section about the tools and platforms to use. You will get the document, you will get all the information, and so don't worry, your questions will be answered. Bruce, over to you.
Just wanted to share, just like you saw the four of us working today, building a community or supporting a community network, sometimes it takes an ensemble. So you want to look for complementary players. Ray's very good at technical knowledge. Davide is very good at structuring things. Ilaria was very good at translating what we had into her own needs. And sometimes you need somebody like me who can type really fast and listen. So it takes an ensemble. We usually had 3 or 4 of us providing core training. Our community management certification program was provided to close to 500 colleagues inside and outside of the bank. So thank you, Davide.
Thank you, Bruce, for your comment, and thank you, everybody, for joining in today. I'd like to hand over to Ginetta for a quick wrap-up, and so we will know more about the future Knowledge Cafes organized by km4dev.
Thank you, Davide, Ray, and Ilaria for having shared with us your knowledge and for all the suggestions you provided to our audience. Thank you also in advance for sharing the resources with all the participants using the email addresses that were collected through the registration form. We also look forward to continue the conversation on km4dev. So stay tuned for a new conversation to be kickstarted about communities of practice. And before we wrap up, I want to share again a few quick tips to help you engage more with km4dev and be notified of our future Knowledge Cafe. We are always present on different social media, from Facebook to Twitter to YouTube. We have an incredible dgroups.io forum, and of course we have a wiki, the website, and a journal. And in the next months, we are going to have 2 important Knowledge Cafe. Then the one in English will be in September with Ellen Gilman and Ewan LeBourne about liberating structures. And tomorrow we will have a Knowledge Cafe in Spanish, of course, with several KM practitioners, John Buzard, Sofia Alvarez, Marta Girard, and many others. This will be an open conversation on different aspects of knowledge management. So stay tuned. And of course, thank you very much for your participation. We are going to have a break summer for 2 months, but of course enjoy it, and see you soon, I hope, and as the Italian used to say, arrivederci.